excuse me, we're going to call the work session to order. It's being 6 o'clock, so there will be no action taken at this work session. We just discussed topics, and the first item on the agenda this evening is public comments. So I do have a list of public comments. If these are public comments, would be to speak preferably not to an agenda item. If you're speaking to an agenda item and you want to make that comment now, that's great, but then I won't allow that comment to be made in that item. So anyway, I think the three of you, Eric, Chris, and Patricia, all want to speak to the Saros, is what we're speaking to? Okay, all right. So if that's not the case, you're more than welcome to come up and speak about another topic if you like, but I would, okay.
I'd like to wait until the first section.
Okay, everyone agrees? All right, are there any other public comments at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the first item. And that's going to be set us on the Shero investigation. Jim, are you handling this?
I am, thank you. Good evening. I'll just do a little bit background here, and then Kim Parducci will give a presentation. The City Council received a comment from Eric Clough with the Front Street Bike Works at an earlier council meeting in which he suggested the city investigate bike routes, specifically a route that would safely convey bicyclists from Front Street area to Mingus Park. Mr. Clough provided a proposed route that implemented type 3 bicycle facilities, and in this particular case, Sheros. Council then directed staff to coordinate with a transportation engineer to investigate alternatives for a safe bike route. The city formed a bicycle committee comprised of several members of the community who are avid bikers. That included Eric Clough, Brian Tuss, Jamie Faraday, and Kurt Benward. Staff contracted with Kim Parducci of Southern Oregon Transportation Engineering and has conducted 2 meetings with the bike committee and the engineer. Ms. Parducci is here to present the draft report to council and address any questions the council may have.
All right, questions for Jim, and then we'll take public comments. So Jennifer's not here this evening?
That's correct.
Okay.
We have a presentation? Or?
Yeah. I would say it's more of an informal summary of what we did in our analysis. I don't think we have like a PowerPoint or anything like that, but
right.
you guys have you had this in your packet, right?
Correct.
You had the analysis. So what I was going to do is just go through sort of what we were asked to do and then kind of a summary of results, if that works
perfect.
for everyone.
Okay.
And then I think that when we get some testimony, then we can discuss it openly. If that's okay, is that all right with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just to kick it off, I'm Kim Parducci with Southern Oregon Transportation Engineering.
Okay.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. We were asked to look at, as Jim said, a route from Front Street to Mingus Park. And the route that we were asked to look at was a route that had striped Sheros. And striped Sheros are like a chevron type striping that allows bicyclists to share the road with vehicles. So that was the task at hand. And we were also asked to come up with a couple of additional alternatives that just could be considered as well. So that's what we did. We gathered information, data, volumes, roadway speeds, classification of vehicles, all the same kind of things you gather when you're looking at the roadway. And we looked at Market, 4th, Commercial, 10th Street, and then we looked in the TSP to look at what data was like on 7th, Anderson, and some other streets around this same general area. The main route that we were looking at was the citizen requested route, which started on Front Street, took Market, basically, to the west all the way to 4th Street, and then turned south on 4th Street, came down to Commercial, took Commercial all the way past 7th Street, all the way to 10th Street, to go north to Mingus Park. And that's basically the route. So we considered that sort of our alternative one. And then we evaluated whether or not Sheros would work on that route in particular. And what we came up with was kind of like a modified alternative one, and that's based on, after we gathered all the information, there were a couple sections that the roadway volumes were a little bit high for Sheros, so we just recommended those areas would have bike lanes instead of sharrows. That was pretty much the only thing that we looked at that we were changing on that alternative one. So alternative one we looked at would be sharrows on Front Street all the way to, from Front to 4th Street on Market would be sharrows, because the speed is low enough and the volume is low enough, traffic volume. On 4th Street from Market to Commercial, they could also be striped sharrows. And then from Commercial, from 4th Street to 7th Street on Commercial, that section, that 3-block section, the volumes were pretty high. They were in the upper 6,000 a daily trip range. So we felt like bike lanes would be more appropriate there. And in the city's TSP, they have a plan for bike lanes on Commercial and on Anderson in the future at some point. So that was really the only change we made there. And then the only other change we made to that alternative was the section of 10th Street from Commercial to Mingus Park. We felt like there's room for bike lanes to be striped and that they were a little bit safer because the speeds were a little higher on 10th Street and the volumes were a little bit higher as well. The range, I mean, there's the guideline for when you want to maybe consider bike lanes instead of just sharrows is about 3,000 daily trips. And this section of 10th Street had, I think, like 4,600 trips or something like that. And it's probably going to grow too, since Mingus Park is a destination. So that was, in a nutshell, sort of our alternative one modified that we looked at. And then the challenging part of that alternative was we had to try to figure out a route back, because it was pretty easy getting to Mingus Park, but because it's on a one-way couplet, the traffic route back was something we spent a little bit more time looking at. In this particular modified alternative one, we actually considered a contraflow lane, which is a lane that goes the opposite direction on the one-way street. So we considered that as our first option, thinking that it would go back the same way it came and it would be maybe intuitive for people. But in researching the contraflow lanes, they're typically on the left-hand side. They're typically to the left of the motorist, which would put that lane on the south side of Commercial. And that presented some problems that we felt were maybe not safe in trying to cross them across Commercial at 7th Street to get them on the south side, so that when they return, they can make the loop back to 4th Street. We're going to come back to that, because after we did our analysis, we looked at some additional things. We looked at a two-way bike lane and some different things on that route. Actually, Eric contacted someone at ODOT, and he got some good information. I talked to the person at ODOT. So I'm going to talk about that at the end of this summary. But at the time, we weren't looking at the two-way bike lane. We were just looking at this contraflow lane. So in looking at that single lane that moves in the wrong direction against the one-way traffic, we went ahead and decided that that wasn't probably the best option. And we went to our next option, which was to follow 7th Street to the south and loop around on Anderson in order to loop back to 4th Street and make the loop back to Market and back to Front. So that was sort of how we modified that alternative one to get a route back. That was what we came up with for that. And that's alternative one. Does anyone have do you want to talk about this as we go through this, or does anyone have any questions about that first alternative that we looked at?
Questions?
No.
No one? Okay. So the second alternative that we looked at an alternative that looped fairly similar to the first one, except we actually carried it all the way to 101 with the mindset that at some point ODOT will probably be looking at putting bike lanes on 101, at least through this area of downtown. And if they do that at some point, it would be nice to have bike lanes on Commercial that connect all the way through. And it'd be nice to have a bike lane from 101 on Commercial all the way to 7th, as well as on Anderson from 7th all the way to 101, that would loop you all the way back to Front Street. I think it's just kind of more of a bigger picture look at some point the city's going to want to have bike lanes on all their facilities downtown. So it was just an effort to consider how we would eventually meet that goal. So that second alternative basically took the traffic from Front Street on Market to 101 and then brought them down 101 to Commercial, and then in a bike lane all the way to 10th Street. There's a small section of Sharrows in between 7th and 10th, but for the most part, a bike lanes all the way, and then from 10th Street to Mingus Park, again, they'd be in bike lanes. Coming back, same way, this is an alternative too. They would go back the same way they came, except on 7th Street, they would head south, loop around on Anderson, come all the way down to 101, and then loop back to Front Street. So that was alternative 2. Alternative 3 considered taking the bike lanes, still using 101, but taking the bike lanes from Mingus Park in the back, coming the return route straight down 10th Street, and then tying that in with Anderson and making a bigger loop all the way back to 101 that way. With alternatives 1, 2, and 3 too, the way that we tried to lay these out was that they could all kind of be used as hybrid alternatives where you can mix and match the different things that you liked. So with any of these alternatives, you could also, instead of looping all the way back to 101, you could always just loop back to 4th Street and then make the loop back to Market and back to Front Street that way. But really it was just to present some ideas that can be discussed and people can give some feedback as to what they think makes the most sense and whether or not we're going to phase this and that kind of stuff. So we looked at those 3 main alternatives, and then we provided a little bit of feedback for what some of the impacts would be. And the main impacts would be loss of parking. So if you have anywhere that you install a bike lane, you're going to lose parking on that street. So that's something to consider. The way that we moved the bike lane on Anderson, in alternative 2, we had it on the north side of Anderson, which made sense because the traffic's moving south on 7th Street and it's making the corner and it's heading to 4th Street. So we kept it on the north side, but that's probably the side that's the most utilized for parking. So that could be a downside to that. The alternative 3 had bike lanes on 10th Street and then Sharrows on Anderson until you get to 7th. And then from 7th to 4th, the bike lane was on the south side of Anderson, which would remove parking on the south side, but that doesn't seem like it's utilized quite as much. So that might not be as big of an impact. But those are some of the things that we considered was loss of parking and then, of course, cost if we had to widen any of the streets. One of the other considerations was 10th Street at Central gets pretty narrow because we have the 3-lane section there. So whether or not we can actually stripe a bike lane in that section in either direction is questionable without some widening. So it would have to probably be widened in order to do that. So those were the 3 alternatives. And I wanted to bounce back to the notion of the contraflow lane and then the 2-way bike lanes. So contraflow lane, it just moves in the opposite direction of traffic. So when we were considering that, it was going to be a lane on the south side of Commercial that would just move in the wrong direction against traffic and have a buffer between the motorist and the bicyclist. And we didn't think that was a great fit. But looking at another alternative, and this is something that I think Christine gave you hard copies of. This was a project that that ODOT was doing in Philomath. And I wanted you to see this just because it shows a 2-way bike lane, and it actually shows it on the right-hand side, which is not traditional. And this is where if we were going to have or consider a 2-way bike lane on Commercial, it would make the most sense to have it on the north side or the right side of the motorist. But I want to point out some challenges that we would have if we're going to do that. And one is basically the same challenge they had in Philomath, which is where you transition at 4th Street, which is a signalized intersection, the cyclist that is heading, I guess it would be in this case, they're heading eastbound, they can't see the signal, so they have to have a signal indication on the northeast corner that tells them what the signal is, whether it's red, yellow, green. And in order for them to get a protected movement, which would be required if they're going to make a right turn and head south on 4th Street. They would have to have an actual bike signal phase. So that traffic signal would have to be modified so that we could incorporate a bike signal phase in order to have this two-way bike lane here on the north side of Commercial. So in theory, it seems like a pretty simple idea, but there are some things we'd have to do in order to make it work safely. And so that was one of the things. I spoke to ODOT, and I know Eric spoke to ODOT, and I think that there's just a few things that have to be considered if this was going to work. So a couple of the other things that came out of my conversation with ODOT that I wanted to share with the group was the gentleman at ODOT that does a lot of the bike and ped stuff. He mentioned that in looking at this particular area, he thinks there's two options that might be other things that could be considered. One, he thinks if we transitioned at 5th Street, it might make more sense. And I know that we have the pretty steep incline on 5th Street, and that's the downside of that. But the one benefit of 5th Street transition is that on the south side, it's a one-way northbound lane, so there wouldn't be any cyclists making a right turn, and there's also no signal. So they could transition into the Sharrows on 5th and make the route back to Market and then flow with Sharrows all the way to Front Street. So that would be one thing that would work at 5th Street. Another option would be we could take the route to Mingus Park, we could actually take through 4th Street, and we could have just a normal bike lane on the north side of Commercial to 5th Street, and then at 5th Street we could transition to a two-way bike lane. And then the return route would just turn at 5th Street and return back. That's another kind of modified option of if we wanted to incorporate a two-way bike lane on Commercial. But those were some of the considerations that we made there. One final thought, and I know this is a lot, I'm sorry there's so much here, but one final thought that we were talking about was we know that if we're going to have a two-way bike lane, you need a minimum of 10 feet for the bikes, and you need a buffer. And in order to do that, we would have to remove parking on both sides of Commercial. So that's a pretty big consideration. If we were to incorporate the sidewalk on the north side of Commercial and utilize that space and then just bump the curb out to the south so that we could incorporate the parking lane just on the north side of Commercial, we could consider a multi-use path for that 2-block section, which would allow pedestrians and cyclists to both share that space and move back and forth between 5th Street and 7th Street, and that would be another option. But those are all of the things that we looked at, and really what we wanted to do is just present all of the things that we could see and some of the challenges so that you guys would have things to discuss tonight and think through.
Any questions, anyone?
Well, you've given us a lot of information. I guess my question to you is those last three, your learnings, I didn't see that in the report.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that, thank God we have staff to do this because I'm tracking as well as I can. But again, there was a lot of information. So are they going to be getting that information from you, those last three findings, so we can consider that as well?
Sure, definitely.
Okay, perfect.
So another
I
thing-
would
go ahead.
definitely be interested in seeing that. I actually did bring this up at the meeting of the Coos Bay Downtown Association yesterday, and I don't think they were part of the conversation. I would hope that if there are conversations in the future that we at least have someone from the Downtown Association there. Parking impacts, they're excited about the possibility of slowing traffic and getting them to businesses in the downtown area, but parking concerns are significant, especially on Anderson. One of the other concerns they had is a Sharrow on Commercial, which is probably the reason that they didn't look the return route. That side of the road, there's a lot of access to the roadways from businesses, and they may not be looking that direction to see a bicycle coming
Now, are
So-
you talking about the section of commercial between 4th and 7th?
Well, you got
Probably.
second and third to get, if you're using commercial, you got those side streets.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
And they're
those
two-way-
sections.
There's two-way traffic there.
So,
Okay.
I was very interested in the two-way Sharrow. That seems like one of the better alternatives.
The
but we
two-way
do-
bike lane? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and maybe the multi-use, but I would like to see them
Okay,
and share that with the Downtown Association.
I agree.
Yeah, I was sold on an alternate 3 until you brought some of this other stuff up. So yeah, again, if we
Yeah.
can get this information to the staff. I do want to make a comment. I'm probably going to blow this up, and I did have this conversation with the mayor, is, and I hope we'll hear this in the public comments. I guess my comment is I want the, obviously, citizens of this community to use this route, but I also want visitors to take advantage of it as well. And so after I read this and I was talking with the mayor, I thought, how come we're not actually going into that downtown corridor? Because if I'm a visitor, I want to cycle along the boardwalk, right? I want to see those beautiful vistas. And I wondered, when this group formed, was there a reason specifically as to why you wanted this route? And it sounds like there is, and it sounds like I'll hear that, but wearing my tourism hat as well, I thought, gosh, couldn't everyone use this, and is it the highest and best use?
And my comment is that we have done a Front Street design, and we talked about putting a bike route on Front Street. I guess my question is, why not Front Street and 101? I don't understand. You could take Front Street all the way down to Market and then over to Commercial. I mean, there's ways to get there without using 101. And when we've talked to ODOT on this Front Street design, they would have to buy into this, and they would have to do the alterations to make that happen. So I don't understand why we're not using Front Street when we've already looked at it and we've got a design for Front Street, and we were talking about using multi-use where it would be a bike path and a pedestrian path. And we're talking about extending the, we call it a boardwalk, but basically it's a sidewalk that's going to be 8 to 10 feet all the way down. So I guess that's my question. Why not Front Street?
Why not Front Street from where to where?
Well, you can go from Coos Bay Village all the way down to Market easily.
Right, but what this group wanted was a path to Mingus Park.
Well, but
Right.
that Market would start to get you to Front Street. I mean, you got Market here already. So
Right.
you can go to Market to Commercial. I mean, there's ways to get there using Front Street instead of 101,
Okay,
is my thinking. And
Yeah.
then you still tie it into downtown. We're talking about commercial and making it multi-use, which I think is a great idea, And so, anyway, it's just, and we've already talked about Front Street being a bike path,
right.
so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think 101 was just an alternative.
Well-
It's Front Street,
Well-
101's being used all the way, I think.
101 was just used just to make the connection back to Front Street, rather than taking Market back. That was the point of crossing 101 and using 101 was that if ODOT's going to come through and they're going to install bike lanes through this section, you may as well utilize that and tie them into bike lanes on your main streets, which would be Anderson Commercial, to loop back. That was the thinking there.
Are we getting feedback from ODOT? Because downtown, obviously, you've seen it, is difficult.
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
101.
and I actually spoke with Roger, the gentleman at ODOT, and he didn't think that they had anything, in the near future for bike lanes on 101. And it's challenging because they would have to get rid of parking to do it. And again, the parking is really important. So I don't know when you're going to see anything like that, but
Well, if you could talk to them, we need a light at Market. That would solve it. That would help everything. Well, it's truthful. I mean, I don't know if they
That
ever
would be
drive
a
it, but
compromise.
it's extremely dangerous. And if we want
Yeah.
access to Front Street, that's the best spot to go. I mean, whatever. I mean, I'm sorry.
yeah. Yeah, and we did talk about, I know in our group, we talked about some different crosswalks that are planned at, I think, Market in front. They have some things like that right now in the works.
So, well, I can ask the group when they get here. I mean, I know that we're going this way to get to Mingus Park. Have we thought about going the other way, using the light, going across where Day Ship is? I mean, there's some hills and stuff there, but, I mean, it's a lot easier path to get to Mingus Park that way. It's a little bit more difficult, but, I mean, as far as biking, traffic-wise, I don't know. Anyway, I'm
It's all-
going
it's
to
all
tell you
uphill
what
to get
I can tell you
downhill.
what I do now. When I, in Coos Bay Village, in that area, I don't go down one Front Street and go to Market. I use the light and get out of there, because getting across is very difficult. So, anyway, just a thought. All right, so,
Any
Carmen
comments?
and-
Comments?
We have any comments on, virtual comments about the bike lane?
Yeah.
Oh, Carmen, I didn't know you were here. I apologize. I
Yeah,
think when I
I'm
talked to you this
interested.
afternoon, you were going to be here, so I just didn't, okay, Carmen, yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in, I guess, the more dedicated bike lanes. It's an interesting concept having the opposite direction bike lanes, sharrows, kind of. I'm not so sure about how that will play out, but I mean, if it's working for other communities, I'm interested in hearing more about that. But personally, I liked the bike lane on Anderson, down 7th and around on Commercial. I realize it would take out a little bit of parking. We are adding some parking downtown, so hopefully that'll help and maybe even be still a net positive on the parking for downtown. I bike all of this route a lot, and that seems like the most useful route from my perspective. Having the bike lanes go down 10th Street seems a little bit more impacted, or like it would impact traffic flow more than I would anticipate as being needed. We had some comments on the sharrows and their usefulness. I think that they are useful, and it would help, especially if there's, bike lanes that lead into sharrow sections. So I think that alternative 3 was kind of my preferred route. I think that was the one I was looking at. Or maybe it was alternative 2. Yeah, alternative 2. I liked that one. But in terms of keying it into bike lanes on Front Street, I think that's absolutely a great concept. So I'm glad to see that we're working on this. As somebody who bikes a lot and sees a lot of families going downtown on bikes, it is kind of scary, and Commercial can be kind of sketchy. So I'd love to see some bike lanes there. So anyways, that's my comments.
I got 3 comments and 2 clarifying questions, and acknowledge in advance I haven't driven around, bicycled around town since I was in high school, so. But I wouldn't want to see any contra routes. Like I've seen somebody get hit head-on on a bicycle. It's messy, it's not good. The loss of parking with different options concerns me. Obviously, we've got a deficit of parking, and that could be partially offset with the parking we're developing on the old fire station lot, or not the old fire station lot, but that other building's lot.
The Lockhart, yeah.
Yeah, the old Lockhart lot, but I would need to know how much is being offset versus loss. And the 2 things I wanted to get clarity on. First one, if I remember right, it's already legal to bicycle in a traffic lane, correct?
Yeah, you can, for sure. I think the sharrow just makes the motorist aware that they're sharing it with a bicyclist. That's the point of the sharrow.
Okay, and the part that just, I might have missed the lead on it, but why is it specifically going to Mingus? Because I think the point was made that
Yeah,
the
that was
shops
just
are in the other part of town.
honestly, and
I
Eric
really
can
like
speak to this.
Mingus Park. I'm not saying I
Right.
don't like it. It's just, why?
I think I see it as a starting point.
Okay.
It sounds like this group just really wanted a starting point to get people thinking about bike lanes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Wasn't
you-
sure if I was missing something.
Yeah, no.
That was I think that was the direction that they were given, that we were given, and then we gave. to
Stephanie,
staff.
could you use your microphone?
Sorry, I forgot I turned it off. I think they were given that direction at
Okay.
the request of the group that was looking to start, and then we gave direction back to staff, so you had that to work.
Right.
That's fair. That's all I had.
Okay, any other comments from the council or staff?
I'd like to jump in on that. in terms of why Mingus Park. I see a lot of benefit sitting on the Parks Commission. Connectivity of parks to downtown and just, you know, the access to it through multimodal approaches is a benefit to, I think, all parks. And from here, it might link in to other ways that we can, you know, get from park to park, or yeah, like you were saying, just kind of the beginning point.
Okay. It's a starter step.
Yeah,
Right.
Gotcha.
exactly. Yeah, I see a lot of benefit there. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, public comments on this item. Yep, whoever wants to go?
All right, well, thank you. My name's Eric, and I can answer a couple of these questions about why. And because we did approach the city with this proposal, and I think, as was said, it really was our thinking at the time was we wanted to propose, this may be a little optimistic thinking, but we wanted to propose something that was simple and low cost for the city to do that would support cycling. And so, like I say, we were probably overly optimistic about how easy that was going to be and how costly it might be, but connecting Front Street, which is where Front Street Community Bike Works is located, and there's the whole development there, it seemed like it's a strong concept linking Front Street with Mingus. And so that's kind of the why. I guess another thing I want to point out, that there's a lot of weeds to go into here, and I think Kim did a pretty good job of trying to give you a bunch of information without going too deep into the weeds, because there are a lot of complications, and I recognize this. I just want to encourage the city council, city staff to keep after it, because I think it's important, and I think we can do it if we pursue it. One thing that I want to clarify in our proposal, especially regarding this two-way bike flow and the contra lane, is that in my mind, my envisionment of this, and I think most of the examples where you'll see a two-way flow, is that it's a physically isolated bike lane. There's a barrier, either a 4-inch curb or maybe a soft curb with the flexible bollards, or some combination of those things. And there's other features that go in there to protect cyclists and motorists from interacting negatively, you might say, to make a mess, as Drew said. So keep that in mind, please. At least when I'm thinking of this two-way flow, it's a physical, but there's some sort of a physical barrier there, and I think that's really important to remember.
That wasn't what I pictured, so I appreciate that.
Right. The other thing I wanted to do, and I don't know if I've got a time limit here because I want to stay concise and to the point and let other people speak and move on, but again, we feel that this is a starting point for us. The transportation system plan, generally calls out the need for cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. That's all good. The details of how that works are complicated. And so we saw this as a starting point, and if we can go from there, we might not get a perfect route from Front Street to Mingus. And even if we only had a one-way route, that's better than no route. So the other thing I wanted to do is say that I am proposing, or actually our group is proposing, that we create a standing committee, if you will, kind of like your some of the other committees you have that are stakeholders that can meet with the city to kind of proactively do some planning and work with the city in terms of, hey, you've got a development plan that's going to be implemented in 2 years on 4th Street, and let's talk to this cycling pedestrian group and see if we can include something there, okay? I would really like to see that. In fact, I just got a very informal petition, if you will, from over 50 people that signed it on one day at we had a bike shop event this weekend, and we just went around asking people, are you interested in seeing cycling infrastructure in the city? If you are, we're trying to propose the city establish a committee for consulting and advising. And so I would like to ask the council to consider that, and I think we would be able to find some strong and interested members to participate in that. And I guess I'll just leave it there unless anybody has questions for me.
Comments? Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Next? Anyone else? Okay, so I think that how Eric had framed this, that this is a start. Obviously, there's some things that need to be thought about, some challenges. Staff's got, I said, I've heard what we've said. There's a couple more suggestions on plans. I'm going to make an effort to, start going down these paths and see what maybe I can see, and I would suggest the rest of the council do that, and staff, Nicole, and whoever else wants to join her. But, and I also believe that having a committee that would address traffic and a bicycle or cycling situation when these streets are being redone as we are now. I think it's too bad that we didn't have this in place when we did 4th Street, for instance, and things like that. But I think that we need to start having that mindset moving forward, so might be a good idea. I'm one of 7, so I think it would determine what this council feels like. But anyway, those are good thoughts, and I appreciate them, Eric.
Can I just make one more comment?
Sure.
I grew up in the 500 block of Market. I spent a big portion of my bicycling days in getting to and from Minkus Park to my home, and we created our own 2-way on the sidewalk between Mingus Park and 5th Street, and it worked very well. And I felt very safe until I accidentally hit a telephone pole at a high speed when I was chasing my brothers, but and broke my arm. But I think it isn't as hard as we think it is, because we do have some room in there, and it sounds like there is some good data that leads to something that might work in there. And again, it is a start, and may not have as much of an impact. I'd be interested in looking at that more.
No, I don't think this is something we just shelve by any means. I think it's something that we need to keep moving forward and progressing and trying to come up with a way to get this thing started and get to where it may be. So, I don't know. And I'm not sure when you want to bring that back. Another analysis. I'm not sure we want to touch base again in a month or a couple months. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to start walking this area. I'm sorry, I walk, I don't bike, but I still will get a chance to check these out a little bit closer and see if there's a path that I think might be, something that we can do. I think we only need to do it.
Is there something that you would like for the Coos Bay Downtown Association to do?
Well, I
in the
definitely think
interim?
they should be involved. So however they want to be involved, I think, yeah, they need to be.
So we'll let
Absolutely.
Nicole figure out what
Because
that
the
looks like.
thing is that at some point in Junction in here, I can't see a way around without impacting parking. So that means that we need to make sure that there's buy-in from the Downtown Association, and where we can find a way where there might be a multi-use that was talked about. That's my suggestion, but I don't know. That's just my first blush at this. So, but I think those are things we need to look at.
I guess my last comment would be cost and opportunities for grants. And so I guess I would ask Nicole, and I don't know, or staff, to figure out if once we get that more of the information from you, what are we looking at for cost and how feasible can we do that? And I get excited about projects like this, and you guys are really good at getting grants, so that translates into how quickly can we get this done. So
Isn't there money out there for bike paths?
So we do receive some of our state gas tax by statute is dedicated to bike paths and pedestrian, bike ped path. It is not a lot, probably not even enough to fund this even very small project, but we can definitely look at some grant opportunities. I think we need to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at in order to put a cost even on some options. So I think we can work on that, though.
And we really do need ODOT to get some buy-in on this. I mean, they can just, I'm sorry, they need to step up to the table and be involved in this. Because 101 is here, and it needs to be involved in some degree. So, anyway. I know, I keep talking about ODOT, but anyway. Okay, anything else? All right. Hey, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Staff, thank you so much. Thank you, Kim. All right.
Thank you.
Did you have any more comments on this? No? All right. All right. For another day and another time, see what we can come up with. Thanks again. Next item is the survey regarding public library facility. Sammy, are you going to, I hope you have this survey memorized, right? How
Oh,
many
yes.
pages was it?
I stayed up all night memorizing all of them.
Anyway, no, it was very in-depth. I was, a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. So anyway, we'll let you take it from
Okay,
here.
great, thank you. Just as a recap, during the March 21st, 2023 City Council meeting, Pawlowski Research presented information on public polling and surveying regarding voter opinions on cost and location of a new library facility. Council decided to approve a study and outreach not to exceed $80,000. The survey portion has been completed, and tonight they will present their findings, and Adam is online, and will hit the highlights, I guess, for you all, so you then memorize your 200 and some pages.
So you're going to take us through this?
I am here, Adam Pawlowski, and yes, happy to take you through it. Sorry, I'm trying to block the sun with my big head. I am going to go through an abridged version. Let's call it an executive version of our data, but certainly can speak to any of the other data that we present. So, with that, if Sammy, if it's okay, I'm going to share the executive version here, and let's see here. So, our survey was 300 participants, and forgive me if you've heard some of this already before, but 300 is quite robust for a city the size of Coos Bay. Typical survey might be statewide, 700 or 900 or something like that. So really strong numbers within the city. And English and Spanish were offered. 3% of your residents chose to speak Spanish or respond in Spanish, and it took about 14 minutes to complete. About a third of the respondents were on the phone, but most chose online. It's just kind of how we communicate today. And of those phone respondents, you had a pretty sizable number who were landlines. It's a little bit different than most of America, but a little older population is going to respond that way. But online, about half the people came on board either through an email or a text message, half and half. So this is a highly representative survey of your likely voters, the people that would show up in a 2023 election. That's who we targeted, that's who we talked to. It wasn't all residents, it wasn't even all voters. It was a very likely survey, likely voter survey. Going there, we asked some questions like, how frequently do you visit the library in Coos Bay? 2/3 say they go on some regularity, right? A few times a year or more. So that shows a really high level of engagement in your library and usage of your library. There are about 31% who say, or 32% say never. 61% of voters, the likely voters, say the city should be responsible for funding the library. So this is kind of interesting. Your voters could have said, oh, that's somebody else's job. And you can see that 32% say it's the job of a nonprofit organization, and 38% say the state should be involved in this, and they were able to select as many as they wanted. But the majority, a big majority, 61%, we'll round up there, say the city of Coos Bay should fund it. So they're not suggesting maybe that you should shirk your responsibility, or you should, or you should not pursue resources somewhere else, but they really do believe it's a center point of one of the things that you do as a city. And then we get right into it. We didn't dance around the issue at all. We said, here's what might show up on a ballot. If the election were held today, how would you vote? And look, the language is kind of, legalese ballot language of what things look like in the state. And you've got these sections and some articles and things like that. But the bottom line is it's $24 million general obligation bond that would fund a library and a 911 communication center, and would have specific impacts on property owners. That's the way the ballot would look if you were sitting at your dining room table or in a voting booth. So 46% say they're going to vote yes, and 45% say they're going to vote no. 9% say they're unsure. I don't. There's no way to I think we can all look at these numbers and say this is not off the charts great. It's pretty simple to say this is pretty mixed numbers. You don't have a resounding yes or no here. So with that, let's dive into some of the other factors that come into play. What part of a new library interests you the most? So we want to understand what moves people to be interested in the library, to be interested in maybe supporting a new one, and activating to care about what's happening in the library. Well, number one, 39% say they love the community meeting spaces. This is a list that they were able to select, and you can see there's no part of a library that isn't something they really care about, but they do, have a few here at the top that get bunched up a little bit, like, community meeting space and programming for youth and large book and media collection, things like that. But all these things are factors. So the bottom line is, if you're talking about a new library and you want to get buy-in and support and excitement for it, you don't really get to dismiss any of these factors or we'll call them features and benefits of a new library. And then we move to some, we'll call these messages, things that may motivate people to be more or less supportive of a bond. And so the first one makes 49% of your likely voters to be more likely to vote yes. And that's the fact that you have 100,000 visits per year. It kind of puts a number, quantifies the engagement with the library. This is not a dramatically great number. It's about half say they're more likely, 22% say they're less likely, and you've got some unsure and people who just say it doesn't make a difference to them. We also look at the people who initially said, no, we're not supporting a new library, we're not supporting a bond, a measure. 15% of those people who said no originally, they come on board and say, I'm more likely knowing this fact. And of the people who said they were originally unsure, about 9%, you have about 46% of those people that come on board and say, oh, I'm supportive of a bond now that I know you have such a high engagement and you've got this 100,000 visits number. So that's helpful to understand, but again, not resoundingly big yes, but move people to the yes side. The fact that you're going to include a 911 communications center, if that's a part of the new library, 45% become more likely. You got some of those no's and some of those unsures. Perfectly positive message. One of the things you would probably likely talk about, but not one of those things that's really going to dramatically move people. Our best argument is the fact that you're going to build the new library to standards that will allow it to be used for post-disaster response in case of earthquake or tsunami. So that is a mover message here. 56% of your likely voters are more likely to say yes to the bond, knowing that they've got this asset afterwards of a post-disaster response center. 23% of the no voters say they're more likely, and you've got a big chunk here, 64% of the unsures. That really moves them to be more supportive if you were to talk about this and make this a reality. And then looking at our next one, 57% say they're more, or 58% if we round up, say they're more likely to vote yes after learning that the existing library is going away. It's structurally failing, and at some point it won't be viable anymore. So that really does kind of hook people, if you want to say it. 58% say they're more likely to be supportive of a bond knowing that. A big group of your 22% of your no's and more than 2/3 of your unsures are motivated by this message that you might just not even have any library. We've got some mixed numbers here when we say, okay, here's the fine point, here's the fine details. $1.17 per 100,000 assessed, and all of a sudden you've got more people saying no. So now we gave them an actual dollar number. It's not a majority. It's not nearly a majority. You've got similar or a little fewer saying that they're more likely to vote yes, even knowing this data. And so it's really not a significant factor. It's kind of mixed numbers. Looking at these numbers in a more specific way, we have $300,000 home, and if you would basically pay $350 additional per property taxes annually, does this make you more likely or less likely to vote for the bond? So here you have a majority that says no. What we did here is we split the sample. So we asked the question in two different ways. We asked half your likely voters this question about $350 per year on a $300,000 home, and you have a majority saying they're less likely to, or more likely to vote no. And it doesn't do good things to the no and the unsure voters. So we then jump to the other half of your voters that we said, hey, it's $300,000 a year on your typical home, $300,000 a year, but it's $29 per month in your property taxes. And that really changes the game dramatically. The plurality actually is now more likely to vote yes. I'm not suggesting anything about the math skills of myself or your voters. It just from a marketing perspective, it sounds better to have a more kind of evened out amount of money on an ongoing basis rather than a big lump sum. So to the extent that you want to talk about numbers that are going to be relatable and more palatable, you're going to talk about them on a monthly basis versus on an annual basis. And then the fact that the Library Foundation is going to, and the Renewal Agency are going to be putting together resources, funding for things like parking and site improvements is a net plus. They get that there's a collaborative effort, and a majority says they're more likely to support the bond knowing you've got these kind of this little army that's going along with you in this process, and they're not doing it all on their own. And feel free to stop me at any point. I'm sure you'll have questions after, but I'm going quick here. Now we get some fine details about location, which turns out to be really important. We give them several options. We don't give any details at this point. We just give several options of Anderson Avenue, reconstructing where we're at, and then the Frito-Lay site, and the Newmark Avenue, and all these different options, Tuppence Park, and without any other details of those locations, Anderson Avenue has the biggest support, but there's no majority, and you've got a big chunk of people who say they're unsure, and because there's not a lot of context here. But there is a clear winner from the no context list. Then we get into details, and here we talk about specifics of the reconstructing on-site Anderson Avenue. 55% say no, and here are some of the elements of that, right? The size, the 911 center being included, $35 million per year, limited opportunities for outside programs because it's in the tsunami zone. So a lot of the details are in here, and based on these details, 55% say they oppose this location. The next one, Tuppence Park, 32,700 square feet, also the 911 center. The city already owns the land. Again, we're giving context and details, $28 million. 57% say they're opposed this location. So we're not getting friends here. The next one is Ocean Boulevard, also 911, also $28 million. We talk about it as a non-traditional setting for a library with commercial industrial surroundings. Give some context for what this is. You'd have to buy the land, and here you are at 8% who oppose this location. So far, all these locations are plurality or majority opposition. Next, we have Newmark Avenue, and we're at majority opposition, 50%. Again, similar details, 29 million versus 28 million, but some specifics involved. And so, just to be clear, we don't have support for any one of the locations specifically. Then we say, okay, well, what about the two different things here that are most important to you? Is location more important to you, or the cost more important to you? And we find that a sizable majority, 56%, say the location is more important to them than the cost, and you still have some unsure there. And so that's something to kind of hold in your back pocket, because you're gonna have to make some decisions on location and maybe even look at some others. And then we say, okay, here's all the options again. We just give them location and cost here, and we say choose the one that you prefer. And there is there is no consensus whatsoever. You've got, a marginally larger number of people choosing Anderson Avenue, but you've got, even more people who say they're unsure than before, and you've got, just not a consensus by any means. And then we do ask an open-ended question, why would you prefer this location, the one you choose? And you can see categorized here some things that maybe don't get categorized so easily, so some words that you'll see. The open-ended responses, the actual words your voters use, are available in that report that's, I think, as part of your staff report, that you can read through and have context for who's saying it demographic-wise, and what their words are that may have much more meaning to you. But here's some categorization of why they're saying what they're saying. Asking the question again, which is a very typical process, right? We go through this kind of almost, not really a mini campaign, but a mini education process of here's the different options, which one would you choose? And now knowing you kind of maybe grab hold of one of those options, are you supporting or opposing the bond? 53% say the informed people after we've gone through this process say they support the bond. Fewer people say they oppose it. This is a better number, of course, than this kind of couple percentage points advantage. If your goal is to put this on the ballot and have success, but still not a resounding large number, and you still have a few unsure folks that you can certainly at some point make a decision. But this is not a big number. If that question comes up, I'll say it again. It's a small number. It's a small margin. It's certainly better than the number you had on the last ballot, but it's pretty thin. We like to kind of do a gut check by asking what we call kind of the neighbor to neighbor question. And here we have Smith, who says, look, the library is unsound, it's failing, and a library can provide more services and could house a 911 center and the post-disaster center. This is about more than just books for the community. I support a ballot measure. That's Smith says that. And Jones says, look, we already pay enough in taxes. We should use the library we have until we can't anymore. I oppose a bond measure. The kinds of words that may be a little bit charged, but may be really rational for people in your community to say to each other. And you see here that a majority, similar to those who support the bond, agree with Smith, who says, like, I get it, we're gonna lose the library, we don't want to do that, and we have these other added advantages that we can have. So that's comforting, I guess, if you have a policy decision to want to move forward with a library, either reconstruction or a new location, but it's a thin margin. We do know how they want to be communicated with. This is more for outreach and communication measures that we can look at more later, and we can dial into in a more detailed matter. These are your demographics of your likely voters. This is not, like I said, kind of any other amalgamation of who lives in your community, but this is the profile of your likely voters. They're older, they're whiter, they're fairly independent in their politics, and then you can see, they're actually not just your hardest core voters. They're a broader universe of people who voted, newer voters, things like that. But they have lived, and a lot of them have lived there for a shorter period of time as well. So that's a lot of data, I know. It's also not like exactly probably what necessarily everybody wanted to hear. So I'm ready to dive in and offer some other commentary or answer any questions.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Comments, council? Questions, I mean?
Well, I just want to thank you. I think there were a lot of learnings from this. And I guess the one question I have for you, Adam, is if you were a betting man, is the answer, the one that I looked at that seemed to be the most palatable for the voters, was the Ocean Boulevard location. over the existing location because of the opportunity to use the center as a post-disaster relief center?
Well, I'll say this, I'm on a plane tomorrow to Las Vegas, and I'll probably have about, $80 in my pocket. So I won't necessarily call myself a betting man. Look, yes, Ocean Boulevard has some of the, if mixed is better, there's the most mixed numbers there. It's 40% support, 48% oppose. So certainly better than the others, necessarily, but there's no way to, part of my job is to give you accurate data, and there's no way for me to say that we identified a location that would find necessarily success. There's no way for me to say that there's a location that, had consensus. I wish I could have, but we have, limited support for a bond, but no underlying specific location that has real significant backing.
It's more as an observation than a question. This doesn't look real great. Sorry?
Mike.
No, it's on.
Oh, it is, okay.
I wasn't close enough. More as an observation than a question. This doesn't look real great. It looks like, from the money standpoint, the most favored was Ocean Boulevard with only 40%. Once money came into the picture, the downtown site had 54% opposition. Yeah. But once you get to question 22, folks are in support of downtown again over the others. Just a thing for us to look at, I suppose, is whichever number it shows. These questions were all asked in the same sequence for everybody, right?
No, great question. So no, they were randomized as to not impact each other. So we made sure that they wouldn't bias. So there's no successive. So any of those messaging questions and location questions, those were all randomized.
So what I was looking at when I thought they were in order is that I could assume when somebody saw the numbers, maybe by the time they had seen all the numbers related to the different sites, they had changed their mind at the end. If these were randomized, I can't really do that.
Yeah, no, they were definitely randomized, and that gives us the least biased response.
I think what we did learn was that Empire Lakes, John Talbot's Park, is not where we should build a library.
Yeah, my
I think that
favorite
was
the
clear.
least popular.
Yeah.
And it really surprises me. I just can't get that one. I wasn't in favor of it at first, but after learning about it, I thought it was a good choice. But a couple of observations that I have from reviewing this survey is that pretty much half of our population is going to be happy and half of them are going to be unhappy if this were to pass or fail, either way. Secondly, just an observation, I think $1.25 is better than even $29 a month. But people don't pay their taxes that way. They pay it at the end. And I think if we want to be transparent, that's how we have to present it. It's $350 a year. And it's a tough one. And I think that this is what the council struggled with, is the very, interestingly enough, is what the citizens were struggling with. So I think you have good representation on this dais here. I think to educate and inform people is going to be a big number. But information does make a difference. But social media, which was identified as one of the ways that people like to get their information, and a newsletter, social media is one of those really difficult animals, because somebody can make a statement, and we saw it over and over in the campaign leading up to the vote. They can make a statement that may not be true because they don't have all of the information, and that becomes a fact, and then it gets repeated over and over, and it doesn't matter how many times you talk about it. It's a difficult hill to climb, but it is, just was very interesting information. And I think the public is having as much of a difficult time with this as we are.
I still think, though, I mean, there was such great information. I thought, okay, we now know how to run this campaign, right? No matter what location we pick. And I guess the question I would ask Adam again is, do you offer those services? If I feel like we have one last opportunity to get this passed, if the citizens of this community want to do that. And do you, as a company, offer those services to help run campaigns?
So we do, and I believe the budget was allocated last time, and we have internal resources, and if we feel like there's a need, we could bring in, external resources, local or otherwise. So we're on team to help. Yes, absolutely. I just want to, reiterate the reality of where we're at. I don't want to pretend like moving forward it presents any sort of guarantee. It's a challenging environment, but we are here to support the policy decision of the council.
But I think at the end of the survey, I mean, we saw that the more informed voter ultimately did say, yes, I support the bond in a library. So I would imagine if we had a very strong campaign, we could get more yeses.
Yes, and I don't mean to, the budget, I think that is remaining for that sort of project, I would suggest is, a very minimalistic kind of approach. So I think if there's a policy decision to move forward, I think, maybe through staff, we would have a discussion over, how much of a budget might be more budget might be appropriate. And kind of give you some options.
Thank you.
So for clarification, I need, Nate's not here today, is he? Okay, so for clarification, I just want to make sure that we could use Adam's company services to help inform the public, but as far as campaigning, that's another situation that would have to be handled independently. Okay? And I think that's how we approached Adam's company to do this, or got the quote, am I correct? Okay.
As a marketer, we use the word campaign all the time, so that's what I meant. So thank you for clarifying that.
I know. True. Either way. I mean, yeah, either way.
Is there enough unsure? I mean, even at the end of the survey, with an informed person on the other end of that line,
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of change. There was just a very, very thin margin, and I think it boils.
That was also our experience with the Coos Bay School bond, however. It didn't pass the first round, and then it did the second, and it was by slim margins.
Stephanie,
I think that
what you're looking at, I think, is what I was looking at as well. The reason I had asked if the questions were randomized or put in order, you can't use this now to know what the person thought by the end of the survey, because this isn't the order the questions were asked in. That's why I had hoped they were asked in order, because then I would know what a person by the end that's been educated on the issue thinks. But the glimmer of hope in here is question 28. Even though 38% of people were a hard no that apparently don't care if the library goes away, 51% were in favor and 10% hadn't decided. So even looking at that number, we can see that the majority of Coos Bay citizens believe we should have a library. And then we're down to where we're going to put it, but it ends up splitting votes so much. It's just going to be a question of method of advertising and going by the way the different questions are framed. The way 28 comes out, we can see that it's going to be very important for our marketing that it be done in a conversational manner, because the one question that was in a conversational manner had the most positive outcome.
So Adam, can you address Drew's comment about why these weren't done in the same order with all the individuals?
Sure. I mean, the best result is a result that isn't biased by any previous question. And obviously, it's a series of questions, so at some level, some information is going to inform people's responses. But I would argue that the results you have are most indicative of outcomes because people got all the information, not necessarily in a cascading order specifically, and the outcome is based on information broadly that they would receive and see over the course of an outreach effort and potentially some sort of a campaign that happened outside of City Hall. So it's the most accurate reflection of what of what support would look like. Now, obviously, no one's voting on 5 different, well, I don't expect that anyone's voting on multiple locations. But it gives us, this result gave us the best picture of what the voter would likely do based upon the information they had.
But the locations were almost critical in the first vote. So we know that location is an important issue, and there was no decided location, really. So location is a big factor in this, and then money is the other.
And location is conflicted because while the downtown was the most appealing when you only ask location, once you get to dollars, it was the least appealing. So yeah, we've got quite the spread to cover. And just to circle back, I didn't mean to imply the methodology was bad. Each way has its own merits. It's just you can use it some ways and you can't use it others.
And I think that's what concerns me about the thin margin, which is where I still am concerned. Even though Coos Bay passed a margin with a thin margin, or passed a bond with a thin margin.
Well, I know, but I think, and I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think, our options are that we don't do this and let our library fall apart and not have a library, or we move forward in some fashion and try to get this thing passed.
I think at the end of the day, we have to find some way to move forward because that's still the consensus of the citizens in here. There's a lot of debate over where and how much, but ultimately the majority says try.
No, I agree, and I think we need to move forward in that fashion.
Maybe that's the question we need to go out and ask them then. Do you want it to close or do you want it to stay open? And then we go from here. I know, I'm being simple.
I know. Okay, so, I got a few questions. So Adam, let me ask you this. First of all, you mentioned 6% in this is influencer for the disaster center. Was that factored in on the Ocean Boulevard property?
So Ocean Boulevard, I think we specifically said, where are we at here? That it would include a 911 center. We did not say that it would include the post-disaster because I believe you've got that challenge with the location. So we did mention that it is both in the flood zone and tsunamis, in a flood and tsunami zone. So it was in that bulky paragraph of information, that was one of the, probably the factors that made people more likely to oppose it, I suspect.
Yeah, so in the survey that I saw you make, the 911 center and the disaster center were both positive percentages for a location. We can't use the downtown location for a disaster center. We can use the others. So that's why I was asking that question. So the next thing is, in your opinion, I think this had come up at one other time. When would you go out to try to pass this bond? What election cycle?
So in the research that we did and the cross-tabulated results, there wasn't a significant advantage to 2024 today in the polling we did. Intuitively, I know a bigger electorate is going to give you a better shot. But the data didn't specifically bear that out. So I don't want to suggest that the data we have suggests pushing this off. There's a couple reasons why, if you're asking me, and again, feel free, staff, to tell me I'm crazy. If you're asking me, I would say 2024 for a bunch of reasons. You have more time to talk it through and educate. You have potentially the ability to expend more resources in that process. You have a bigger electorate that as you can just imagine, has less of a reason to oppose you. If you have more younger people and more people who don't own property who are going to show up in 2024, election, then they have less of a reason to vote no. And maybe that's a cynical way of looking at the world. For those reasons, I would traditionally say 2024 is an advantage for you. A smaller electorate with a very highly, with a group of people who are going to be older and have maybe more fixed income, things like that, I think it becomes, it could be a little more challenging. Data doesn't specifically say that in this poll, so you get to make that choice. But if you're asking me and I'm the policymaker, I would probably put it to 2024 and give yourself that runway.
Okay, so do you think there's enough time for this to be all put together by the time 2024 campaign or election comes up?
For sure. I think I seems to me that your staff has already started in the process of communicating. You already have data that talks about the messages that work. You've got plenty of opportunity just organically to talk about what we found and what the outcomes are of a failed library. And so you've got plenty of content, plenty of time, and hopefully the resources to communicate it. So yeah, 2024 is a strong contention. And obviously if there's something sooner, then we would help support you. But yeah.
So how do we choose a site?
Well,
I mean, with this information we have, there's a lot of thin data that goes one way or the other depending on the situation, and one of them being disaster centers and 911 center. So my question is, and then we see downtown, which we hear a lot about, but Ocean Boulevard is obviously the next contender, and it might be the favorite with different scenario. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you an answer on selecting a site. I'm sure there's library consultants galore that have a better sense of that, and finance consultants. The data does not give you an answer to that question.
Okay. Public comments, so everyone can hear you, Bob. Just come up. So, and then ask questions or.
Did Carmen and Sarah have anything to add?
I'll find out.
I have two comments, and the one that I would lead off with is that there's one clear thing that I learned from this survey, and that is that a good public information campaign changes everything, and that if we don't get on that and do it, we might as well hang our hats up. That's a critical point to getting the bond measure passed as an effective information campaign. The survey certainly bears that out. Even in an informal survey that only took 10 minutes, the shift that happened by adding in additional information changed people's minds. So that's really a very important factor that we shouldn't lose sight of. And then the second comment I wanted to make is to talk about the property tax issue. $350 is a number that will sink you every time. Telling that annual amount, because it's effectively it's a piece of misinformation, and it's misinformation. I have a $300,000 house. It's worth at least that. But I won't pay $350 on it because I'm only going to pay on the assessed value. But when people hear the $300,000 and $350,000, they think they're paying it because that's the value of their house. Unless people understand that you only pay taxes on the assessed value, which is much lower than the actual market value of your house, then using that annual number is a bad idea. It's really the monthly number that makes the difference. And so I just wanted to make sure that we all carry that forward in our minds, that how we present that piece of the message is really important.
So before any more public comments, Carmen and Sarah, any more comments from you or questions before we continue on with more public comment?
Well, I just think we want to clarify yet again that the questions were they were randomized. They were not successive. And so, Bob, to your point, that's yes, I do agree with you. A good public information campaign is really important, but we cannot draw that conclusion from this survey.
I apologize for jumping in. I'm not understanding why the randomization that all commenced with the same question of a question, again, whether you support or oppose, why that somehow is not indicative of outreach or a public information campaign resulting in greater support for a bond.
Do we mind if I
Because
take that?
Well, go ahead.
What
I
I'm
mean,
hearing is that the questions were randomized, and what the assumption would have been was that as you went through the survey, like you just did with us, that you learned things along the way. But that is not the actual case for the survey respondents.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. They all received all the questions. So
But in different order.
right.
yes. So they still have they still have the exact same set of information when they answer the question again. It's just in a different order, but it's the same information informing their final decision.
Yes, but it's not in like the way you presented it to us was a story and it built on each other. If the questions are randomized, then that's not the case.
Well, I don't agree with that. And I don't
Yeah.
agree because because we have someone that does this for a living, and he does this in this fashion to get the most accurate information. And I understand what
I'm
Drew's
not
saying, and I see what you're saying,
I'm
but
not disagreeing
they're not
with the
getting this,
effectiveness.
they're not getting the information that makes the determination. They're just getting the questions asked in a different way. In a different random fashion. It's not going to change the outcome. It probably makes it more accurate, to be truthful with you, I think.
I agree with you, but I don't think we can draw the same conclusions because it was randomized.
Well, I agree to disagree with you on that one, so I just don't. Let's go from there. Drew, you had a more comment? Wait, okay. Well, you had a comment on this randomization. So.
Oh, yeah, my only point was if you're looking at question 23, they didn't have the data from question 1 through 22 before they answered 23. So if you've got a question of site and a question of money, but they come at different times, they either didn't know something about the site or they didn't know something about the money when they got there. And it's not a critical, the way the survey is done works too. It just changes some considerations in my head from my background doing these things.
Okay.
Mr. Manager, if I could interject real quick, I should be much more clear. The messaging questions were necessarily randomized. The format of the survey was exactly the same for everyone. They got the initial question about the bond and the subsequent question about the bond in the exact same order. It was the questions in between, just the questions, let's call it question number 8 through 15, which would have been randomized, and then, which are the messaging questions with the pie charts, and then question 17 through question 20, which are the questions about the sites. Those are randomized. The other questions that were fixed in place.
That helps, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree, thank you.
Carmen, you had some questions?
Yeah, all that makes a lot of sense. I had assumed that just those were randomized, and so the order of location might be adjusted based on biases of information that was gained in a specific order. So I think when I look at this and I look at the order that we're presented with it, I kind of have a bias towards one spot or one location over another, but it's good to hear that it was randomized. I would just like to echo Bob Moore as well. I think the education portion of this for the bond successful, hopefully successfully capturing a bond here is absolutely imperative. And to me, it's something that however we can fund adequate information so that everybody has factual information in front of them, they will make a decision that will hopefully lead to a prosperous community that that encompasses the library. I think it's an essential piece of infrastructure, and I see some promise here. Of course, it's not the desired outcome on my side. I wish it was a lot more of support and even more of a sway once the information was learned. But, you know, this was, like it was pointed out, it was only about a 10 to 15 minute conversation. So if we get as much information out there as possible, I think we have a real chance of seeing a successful bond measure.
Okay.
Can I just ask, I'm
Sure.
curious if there was anything specific that stood out to Sammy?
I did find the ranking of all of the services and that kind of thing, that was interesting, and things we've heard over and over again. And I was surprised nothing rose to the top for some of the other things, like location. I was kind of surprised it was so close.
Okay, more public comments or input? Whoever. He's just quicker.
That's okay. While it goes up there, you can ask Adam, one of the survey questions were how people getting their information. I don't know if that was included in the packet or not.
It was. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you folks?
Good.
As you noticed from the survey, the park came in dead last. City invested a ton of money. The foundation put a fair amount of money into trying to do something that had very little approval. I believe that if you put a bond issue, not necessarily the number that you're talking about now, hopefully a much lower number, that this will pass at Ocean Boulevard. All right. It isn't going to pass by much. You have to remember this community voted fire station down the first time around. And when they did pass a fire station, I think it was by about 128 votes. And we had, I know that you guys don't do schools, your city government, took 2 times to pass a school bond. You're not going to win big with this. I think that the survey shows some selling points that the people in the foundation can do their marketing campaign with, but you're not going to win big. You're going to be very, very close. All right? My number one complaint that I'm hearing now isn't the park, just simply because no one in their right mind would have put it there to begin with. My biggest complaint right now that I hear from people is the cost. Okay? Now, I don't know if you might be able to tell us that. I believe that you have to specifically say on a ballot measure or on your advertising how you explain the levy. There's a specific language. So this business about so much a day, so much a month, or so much a year, the state says you have to all do it the same every time. What I didn't see when you were trying to sell me a park as a library site is I never got anything in the mail. I never got a phone call. All right. I saw very little positive social media. I didn't see a campaign, at least from my view of being involved in campaigns for stuff. I didn't see a campaign. So if you're going to do this, you're not going to win big. You're probably going to win by less than 100 votes. But you're going to have to really sell this. All right. And I agree with 2024. I think that the quicker we get this out in front of the public again, the quicker it can get done. I don't want to see your library close. I don't want to see us spending $150,000 on HVAC or another shift in the building and another $200,000 for a roof fix. We were very lucky with that. I think it came in at 8 for bids, and then we were able to get somebody to do it for about half that. Okay, it's an accident waiting to happen. It's got mold issues. I don't think we need to spend a ton, as much money as they're planning to spend. I think this needs to be a no-frills, very, very, very austere building. All right, it doesn't need to look like something that's sitting in front of Black Butte like they did on the promo sheets when they were hyping this before. It needs to fit the budget of this community, which is not champagne, it's beer. I'll let you guys go. Thanks.
Other public comments? All right, so.
I want you to say something. You always have very thoughtful comments.
Afterwards, we can talk about the bike lane too, because I was on that group as well. You know, the survey pointed out a couple of things to me. One, Tapas Park and the intersection of Newmark and Leclerc aren't going to be things they're doing. And I agree with Stephanie. I love Tapas Park. I didn't at first, but I loved it afterwards going there. It did get a lot of bad press, and it's almost impossible to overcome it. So, you know, it comes down between downtown and the space off Ocean Boulevard. And it's a very difficult decision. I don't have an answer for you. Anecdotally, there are some people who will never vote for the library if it's not in downtown, right? And then there are some people that will never vote for it and probably out by Ocean Boulevard because for some reason it's in the Empire District, which is unfortunate because Empire is part of Coos Bay as well. So yeah, I think it's down to those two locations. I agree, the education thing's most important. The last campaign, we probably didn't do as good a job as we could have in doing that, and we probably needed professional help to do a better job. And we needed more time, yeah. And the foundation, like the city, has its hands tied a little bit too because we're 501c3, so we're nonprofit. So we have to be careful about how we do things. You know, we can get by with education, but we can't get by with anything, you know, more specific about a bond. So it's a difficult nut. I think with a lot of education, it has a shot. But the difficulty is going to be which location. It's really important to people. And I find it totally ironic that a lot of people say, what makes me more interested in supporting this? One of the ones was the structure's failing. Well, God, if they didn't know that by now, I don't know how they would ever know it. And then the second one is that it needed to be a disaster center, which is a great idea. But then the whole mess of people voted for downtown in the flood and tsunami zone. I mean, it's kind of like, my goodness gracious. So anyways, those two sites, professional help in a campaign, foundational help in any way that it can, and we don't want it to fail a second time, right? And I personally don't think there's any chance of getting it on a bond measure and accomplishing those things before November of 2024. But that's just my opinion, so, okay.
I was going to say, we're almost at the same timeline we were trying to get on the May ballot right now to mobilize this. I think it's too short, too.
Well, I know. Anyway, we need to decide where we're going to go from here. So we need to decide, first of all, and who's going to, how we want to move forward in the council. I mean, location's going to be an issue, and I don't know how we can revamp with our architects to get it much less than it is. I mean, there's some things that we can probably take out, but if we're going to make it a disaster center, then that's going to change the cost. And that's 6% changes the analysis too. So those are things to think about. Anyway, so how do we move forward from this point? You guys have this decision here? I mean,
well, we can't make decisions here, so I would imagine
well, we're going to have
staff
to make.
is
Well,
going
they're going to
to
have to bring something to the next meeting or the following meeting, but we have a time frame that we're going to have to give them some indication how we want to move forward on this. So at the next meeting, whichever meeting that's going to be, we have to decide we're going to have the general election of 2024 or not. Number one.
Yes, that's correct.
And then we're going to have to probably make a decision on, and I'm not going to make that decision on location. I mean, somebody's got to step up with some kind of information on this. My decision on location was last time, and Jim comes up here and harasses me about it, so I'm not going to do that again. So
I love the out of their mind.
yeah, so that has to be made, and I think the group that's been involved in this, the committee, and needs to step forward and give us some idea of recommendation of where to go with that.
Well, and then doesn't the city need to buy the parcel of land? Because currently, if we go with the Ocean Boulevard site, we do not own that land. That was just a hypothetical. So we would need to see about the availability of that if we wanted to go down that route.
Was it available?
It was,
Okay.
we'd have to ask if it's, check
So
to see
what-
if it still is.
What you could still do is, like
And
we've
that-
done with others, we
That's not an
could,
urban renewal,
It is not.
it's not in urban renewal, so,
Yeah. so we don't get any assistance that way.
pardon?
We don't get assistance of it being in an urban renewal
The only,
area.
what do you mean as far as the urban renewal purchasing it? Right. But that's, I mean, I'm not sure what the cost is of the property. But we would have to put an option down to purchase it with the intent that as long as the voters passed it, then we could go ahead and purchase it, because that would be part of the price.
Just to start trimming some stuff off, do we think we could agree we're not looking at the Newmark Avenue or John Toppitz anymore?
Well, I don't think so, but that, I think that's up to the committee to decide, at least give us a recommendation. I mean, I would imagine, we had a comment on that, and I think everyone's in that alignment, I would believe, so.
When does the committee meet again?
When you call the meeting, right?
Which committee are you talking
I know.
Well, I don't know, whatever committee's gonna make, well,
Steering committee,
sure.
the city calls those meetings.
Well, we actually call them, so we'll schedule a steering committee meeting, and make sure everybody on the steering committee has access to the full survey results, and let them chew on it, and,
So,
So
so the
let's,
chances of that even getting on the first agenda in August is.
no, I don't think we should.
It's not going to happen.
Well, I don't think we should, even
next
if we
week.
could, because I want you guys to have a little bit of time to think about this.
Yeah.
So I would say our second meeting in August, but I don't want to go much later than that. I think, unless Adam disagrees, and everyone agrees, we want as much time to go out and promote this, whatever the suggestion but may be, a location.
I'm in support of us moving forward, and I'm insistent, actually, that we use Adam's services, because I feel like we only have one more opportunity to get this passed.
Well,
And
I think there's, again, you guys can discuss this. I think when we talked to Adam to do the survey, we also talked about him going out and educating the citizens, which we can take on. But I think that you and the steering committee and your nonprofit 501c3 need to find another way also to promote this in a fashion that you can. And the more that are out there doing it, the better off we have a chance of making this thing work, I think, taking James' information with it. So anyway, that's what would be my suggestion. But yes, Nicole.
If I can just add a couple things, I don't know if that add any clarity to any of this, but the first thing I would say is this group of people, the council here, have had some tough decisions, and you guys have taken those on, and we've had some good results from that. So this is just another tough decision. We don't really have any obvious ways to go, but I think what we get from this survey is it's going to be close. It takes one vote to win, and we have some uncertain people that we can bring to the side we're hoping for. So we know the things that they'd like to look at. Like, they've told us those things. I think that's our education campaign. We've got people who want to do that. We've talked already with Adam about those opportunities. We just need to get some numbers in front of you so you know which path you're interested in working with him on. I don't know, I think he might have discussed this before, but he has a history of work with libraries, with survey work, with education campaigns, and in Oregon. So there's a lot of great things here, and it does seem like it's a big hill, but we've got some time and some great people working on it. So we could definitely come back with some prices around, some options.
I think it's going to be it's going to be a push no matter what we decide, but we just need to come to a conclusion on what path we want to go, and then get behind it and move forward. And so that's what I'm asking. We need the input for us to just make this decision. I think it's going to be a collaborative effort. So, all right. So we're agreed that not the first council meeting in August, but the second. We'll have some information and we'll make a decision. Agreed? Hopefully it'll be the right one. We'll find out in 2024, hopefully, or whatever date we choose. That's another thing. Make sure that we're all in agreement that 2024 is the way to go, or are we looking at another date? All right. Any other comments from any of the counselors on this or anyone else?
Just wanted to thank Adam again for all of his work.
All right, I want to thank everyone for their input. And now we'll go on to the next agenda item for discussion, and that's going to be regarding proposed shopping cart ordinance. And Captain Linda?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Councilors, this is to update you all on the progress of the shopping cart ordinance. So over the past several years, the presence of shopping carts on our streets, sidewalks, nature areas, and private property have become much more visible and prevalent. This issue was brought up at the Coos Bay Homeless Work Group and also identified as a 2023-2025 Coos Bay City Council goal. During the May 23 work session, I reached out to staff and kind of provided a PowerPoint that detailed, kind of what the problem was and some options that were laid out through state ORS that would allow municipalities to enact an ordinance. Leaving that meeting, I was tasked with reaching out to local businesses and some other similar municipalities who have enacted such ordinances to find out, if it's effective or the impact it's had on them. I did receive response back from the city of Newport and the city of Astoria. They both enacted ordinances within the past 2 years. They both had positive comments. It has been able to reduce the amount of abandoned shopping carts. However, it hasn't necessarily fixed the problem, so it's still kind of a work in progress. The biggest kind of takeaways were it was really a collaborative effort with their local businesses and the police department to, really empower the police department to take action against people that are stealing their shopping carts, to be quite frank. So, as it stands right now, we would have to, have cooperation from local businesses and no dollar amounts for the theft of shopping carts. And, really kind of, if they wish to take criminal action, that is how we would get it before the courts. We can't just, as the police, go take action just on our own. We need the businesses' cooperation. So I think based on the city of Astoria and Newport, that really kind of opened up those pathways of communication with the local businesses. I also reached out to the 18 different local businesses we have that have shopping carts. I presented them with a proposal. It's similar to what was in your packets that kind of outlined the ORS and what actions that may be taken by the businesses if an ordinance is enacted, or what actions could be taken by the city if an ordinance is enacted. And we can go through that if you want. If not, it is in the packet. So I did go hand deliver, notices to all the businesses. I think we got a couple people here for public comment, and then I also received a couple email responses back from some corporate folks. One was from a representative, the CFO from Ace Hardware. They were not in support of the ordinance. They thought it was burdensome to the business, and they also had some experience where they lived. I think it was Redding, California, and the biggest complaint was the ordinance wasn't being enforced. Which, I would agree with that. If we have an ordinance, the idea is that it's enforced. If it's not enforced, it's kind of maybe not the point of the whole thing. So that was their comment. The other one was from the Vice President and General Counsel from Vitamin Cottage Natural Foods, which would be natural grocers. They had several comments. They were requesting an exemption for businesses with no more than one store location in the city. I don't know that would exclude every business in the city, so I don't know if that one's necessarily applicable. But then they also were talking about square footage of store size as another possible exemption to that. They were also looking for some flexibility. They thought it was overly prescriptive what state law lays out as far as marking of carts and using signage. I don't personally see that as a big issue. All the carts are marked with the businesses' names. So that just may take some cooperation between us and the businesses to kind of hash out what that really is or isn't. They believe that the toll-free number that they would have to post and kind of monitor for citizens to call in about was overly burdensome on the business, and they felt it was the responsibility and reasonable for the city to monitor that and then contact the business. They also were curious about the risk that their staff would have to take to go and collect shopping carts from homeless camps or other areas around town. When I went around to the businesses, I tried to reassure them, by no means does the city expect them to go into homeless camps or go take carts from people that are pushing them down the street. The police are more than willing to go handle that. I think we're probably better equipped for that. And then the last part, they were curious about the time frames that local government gives them to pick up carts. They would like an extension on that, and they thought it was maybe not legally permissible for us to take possession of the carts should they choose to not come get them and then have them destroyed. They kind of posed a legal question to that. So that's what I learned from the businesses, but like I said, I think we have some folks here for public comment, and I'm open for any questions or comments.
Comments before we open it up for public comments? Okay, public comments.
So my name is Patrick. I'm the GM for Coos Co-op. And I just want to say for your truly local small businesses, this would be a huge burdensome issue for us. To maintain an 800 number hotline, that just seems kind of crazy for a small business like ours. We have maybe about a dozen carts that I think in the last 7 years we've lost one. So I think there'd be an exemption of some sort for your smaller local businesses. The huge conventional corporate businesses think it's just a cost of business, so they're just going to pay the fine or buy more carts. So I just would like to request the council think about having an exemption for your small local business.
Okay.
Thanks.
Other public comments?
Just have really some questions and maybe a statement on there.
Sure.
First question would be...
Name?
Oh, Chris Vanacek, store manager of the Coos Bay Mart. So the question would be, if somebody comes to my store and takes my cart without permission, is that considered theft?
Yes.
So then, if somebody steals my cart, can I get it back without paying a $50 fee, or... Can we just stop them from stealing my carts?
Don't they have to report the theft?
Yes, that's one of the barriers that I think currently exists. If someone steals your cart, yes, the police can take action on that, and yes, we would return that to your business, assuming that the district attorney's office doesn't want us to hold it in evidence and take it to the courts and present it at trial. I can't imagine a picture wouldn't suffice, but you never know. That's kind of out of my control. So yes, in that instance, it would be returned. But we would need a representative from the business to go to court and testify. A fair market value for the shopping cart would also be needed. And I think one of the biggest barriers is we don't just know this information, so then we would have to call you or have some information on file from the business. Because I don't suspect you probably want calls at 3 a.m. If we're out, with people pushing your shopping carts down the street. So
I have no problem with phone calls at 2, 3 a.m. I love it when you guys call me and say, hey, somebody was just throwing or kindling in the back of the car. Do you want to press charges on this? Thank you very much. I appreciate it when I get those phone calls.
And I truly think that's maybe just one of the barriers that we have is just maybe a collaboration between the local businesses and identifying, who that person is that the police know can be listed as like the emergency contact or a person to testify. And then just, I have no idea how much your carts cost, and, maybe updating that annually or having some sort of system in place where we can know that information, and then just, maybe the next morning shoot you an email and be like, hey, we caught so-and-so with your shopping cart, just confirming you still want to pursue criminal charges. If not, this case can be dropped through the district attorney's office. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, for Bi-Mart, it varies on like the quantity, and they do raise the price and maybe sometimes lower the price, but about $350 to $400 per cart. I don't know what dollar limit you guys have where it starts raising up to being a real serious crime, but we have some of these homeless people out there, and I'm not dogging anybody on that. But they take my cart, I go get it back, I take my cart again, I go get it back. I prefer not to have tug-of-war with my carts that are leaving my property, because going and getting them is a pain. It is priced to do in business. We're happy to help out. We don't want our carts anywhere. I will tell you, if you ever see a Bi-Mart shopping cart anywhere other than the parking lot, somebody stole it. The only exceptions, I've been there 2012, so over 11 years. I have let a bank borrow a shopping cart once to put it inside their building to do donations. That is the only time I've ever had a shopping cart leave that was okay. I've heard about, this ordinance stuff before. I get it. I don't want them around town. I want them to stop taking them. I want them to stop using my time to go collect them, my employees' time to go collect them. I just want them to stop. That's all I had to say.
I understand, and we're in the same situation. We'd hate to have them around town. So there's a cost and imposition for everybody. So
Thank you.
thanks. So I was going to start out on this because this is something that I had brought up, but my intent and my belief still is that we don't put this ordinance out. This is not what I was looking for. I believe that the 3543 is what it costs to collect, but I think there's a lot more that's not being involved in this. The follow-up, all the other things that are involved, I think there's a cost associated with the 800 line, and the signage on the carts is going to be absorbing it. What I was looking for, and I still am looking for, and I think the best solution is put a locking mechanism on the carts. You put one wheel, a locking mechanism, it's like an electric fence. I know other companies that do it. They do this. There's no ordinances by any cities that do this at this time. There are some cities, I believe, maybe in other states that do it. I think we talked about maybe the possibility of California we look into. But in my mind, this is a simpler, cleaner way to do it, and it stops it. The thing is if we go out and we see a cart from Bi-Mart with a homeless person, and you can correct me wrong, if I'm wrong, either one of you, Captain or Nate, is if we go and confiscate that and dump the contents out, we're violating that person's right under the state law, and we have to log all that information with that information, the contents out of there. Am I correct? Even if, and then we have to hold it for so long. I mean, it gets very complicated. So I believe that we could eliminate a lot of this by putting these locking mechanisms on, and like electric fence. That's my take on it. And I think that's the way we should proceed and try to find a resolution and a resolve for that. You do it on one wheel. Carmen did a Google on it last time. I'm not sure what the cost is, but I think it's a lot less than the $350 and $400 plus, a lot less than maybe even the signage. I don't even know if it's going to be the cost of the 3543. I'm not sure, but I think it would resolve a lot and take care of a lot of issues that we might be dealing with. And let's maybe be the first one in the state of Oregon to get it done. I don't know, but that's how I'm looking at it. Should there be some exemptions for like 8 carts? I'm not sure. I also have been in stores where if they don't allow the cart outside the store, and I've seen that, it's kind of goofy, they put a broomstick or a stick on the thing, and they can't get out the door, but on top of it, they start hitting things inside the stores. But that's their choice, but the cart doesn't leave. Now, is that customer service friendly? Because someone's going to have to take everything out of the cart and not be able to get to their car. So I see that being a problem too. Those are my comments, but that's how I would like us to see us proceed in trying to find a way to do that.
Can you remind us again what the number is that you're picking up on? Are you tracking it? How many we're having to collect?
I know that the police department has picked up roughly 10. Captain Schaefer and I have only been out a couple times this month. But I was down at the city shops today, and I think they have 33, 34 on their board that they've picked up so far this month.
And it's a growing problem?
It's
pretty steady.
I mean, frankly, the Bottle Drop in North Bend seems to collect a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's not, I don't think, as many in our city as there were when we were taking cans and bottles everywhere. But it still seems to be pretty consistent around this 30 to 50 per month number.
So I guess maybe another question is, we have the Property Watch program. Is there a way to, because I think it was Chris that brought it up, about the 3 a.m. in the morning. Is there a way to expand that so that if we see a piece of their property on the street that we can take some sort of action, knowing that they've, given us permission to do that?
Yes, Chief Chapp and I have actually kind of discussed that very thing, kind of expanding the property watch to, encompass shopping carts and such for businesses. And I think that's certainly a viable solution to address the theft component of shopping carts.
But Captain, if it's a homeless person, then we have to take all the items out and log them.
Yes, we would still have to seize them all for safekeeping, but I think maybe long-term, if it deters the theft from happening, then maybe we could reduce the shopping carts. It's certainly going to create more kind of burden on our property technician and our staff to collect all that stuff initially.
Correct. Thanks.
Oh, no, I just, I'm in agreement that I thought we were going to pursue looking into a program with the locks that Joe had mentioned. And so I guess I was hoping we would see what that cost would be and then perhaps like we've done with like the FOG program, we've given monies back, or we've given some money, if you participate in this, you're going to receive this much money from the city to accomplish this. I agree with Joe that I'm not afraid to be first in the state to do something. I agree perhaps that exemptions need to be in play, or we'll have a grant where we can make sure that there's locks. I find it interesting that you did not hear from the big dogs. I didn't hear Walmart mentioned or Safeway. Is that correct?
I went to all the businesses. I spoke to all the management teams. They were all seemingly in support. I encouraged them to come here and voice their opinions and their thoughts of how it would impact their business, but I do not see them.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting that the corporates that we did hear from kind of almost had an underlying threat about implementing something like an ordinance. You know, I think it's important that, you know, our retailers know that small business in our community is important and drives it. The problem is that we have a growing problem, and this has been in discussion. How long have you been working on this and trying to work with businesses in the community to find an amenable situation that works for everyone? And the public is crying out for something at this point. We're seeing more and more concern about shopping carts being left in locations. So it isn't that the city staff hasn't tried to come to some sort of compromise with retailers. And I would like to see some movement from the other side too. Those retailers to see what's going to be the best scenario for everyone.
Did you have no comment? Carmen, Sarah's still on? I don't think so, but Carmen, any comments?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I'm curious, you know, looking online quickly, it looks like they range anywhere from $50 to $150 each. Let's assume somewhere in the middle of that. I'm curious, Patrick, under the mayor's suggestion, which I think is a great one, if that would have the same impact on the Coos Head Food Co-op.
I mean, it's a financial burden. I mean, the grocery business, we make a penny on the dollar per bucket each year, so any expense I can reduce, you know, I'm all for. So, but like I said, our carts don't go very far. So I think focusing on the carts that are being identified and being taken, Walmart, Safeway, Fred Meyer, to work with them to figure out the problem. It's not our problem. We don't lose carts. Our customers are pretty good at bringing carts back. We don't just let them walk away.
But the reality is, we have to be consistent across the board, and if we're going to put an exemption in there, that needs to be well-versed in there.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to go. Sarah, did you hear the comment that was made?
I think I heard most of it, thank you.
He said any cost would be, you know, they work on a slim margin, so any cost would be a burden of some sort.
Well, I do appreciate Councilor DeNovo's comments about providing a small stipend, especially for those really small businesses that will be especially impacted, like Coos Head.
I agree. Carmen?
Yeah, I am in support of the locking wheel mechanism. I think that sounds like the least intrusive pathway forward. I know it has a cost associated with it, but if it saves one card, it might pay for itself within X amount of years. So it might be a good return on investment. I'm not positive, but you know, that's just my 2 cents at the moment.
Thanks. Drew, did you have anything?
I figured with the locking wheel thing, I'm curious more about that, and I wondered if Chris might have experience with those, or if you could.
Can you come to the microphone so that our people online can hear you? Sorry.
Thanks.
Apologize, made you stand up again.
Oh, you're good. I'm happy to stand up, actually. I do know that we have some Bi-Mart places that we end up doing that. I'm just trying to rack my memory on which stores it was. For some reason, I want to say it was a Portland store. And I remember talking to the maintenance department, and this is a couple years ago, about having such a thing done. And the way she was telling me, you have to dig up a perimeter around the property and lay stuff down. And she really told me a lot more about it, going, well, maybe those aren't as simple as I thought they would be, because I was for it when I first heard them.
Right. It's kind of like an electric fence for the dog or something. You have to put something down. You're correct.
And then sometimes it can go out and has issues, or it locks up in the middle of the store. Just all scenarios I never really thought of until she was telling me about the issues she's seen in other places. I'm not against them. I haven't personally dealt with them. And just like a lot of things, you hear horror stories. Sure. Don't want them. So I'm not sure what the price is.
Since we had some trouble getting input out of the other stores, do you think you could talk to your corporate and see what they would think about something like that?
I know they'll do it if they need to.
Just if we get any kind of input, since we're not hearing back from like Safeway, Fred Meyer, Walmart, if Bi-Mart would be able to provide some input, it would be appreciated.
So, I can talk to the higher-ups and see if they want to voice an opinion.
Cool.
In the matter. I did let them know I was going to be here today. They're kind of, go for it.
No, I appreciate it. But I think, I mean, I forget, was mentioned about monitoring an 800 line. I mean, that's going to be an expense. If you put signage on the cart, there's going to be an expense. There's going to be an expense if you have to pay a fine. So in the long run, even though it's either $100 to $150 or whatever, I think in the long run, there could be a savings to the store and a benefit to everybody involved in this. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think the store I talked to was a Walgreens, and it was a solar one also. So they were able to use solar instead of plugging them in, whatever, and charging them. So their corporate did it because it was up in Salem, just like corporate did it up in Portland. It was not mandated by the city. So anyway.
I'm curious, what I kind of got is, so anytime somebody takes off my cart or I see it on the side of the road, I should be more off to let the police know so they can come pick it up.
Especially if it, well, if someone has possession of it, I'd say yes. If it's just laying there, I don't think it doesn't matter, really, does it?
If there's no one around the cart and say the cart is just on the sidewalk, I think the idea is that it's the business's responsibility to pick that up.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, so that's it. But if someone's got it or using it, absolutely call the police.
Yeah, they're not always kind enough.
Right,
to just
and you
hand
don't
it
want
back,
to deal
so.
with that. Right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments on this? Are we in agreement to move forward and see about trying to initiate this locking mechanism, fence type cart thing?
Can we also look into Counselor DeNovo's idea of providing something like we do for the FOG program, where that money might come from?
Well, I mean, if we're getting 30 carts a month and that's costing us $35, that savings would be done over a period of time. If we figured out what we've spent, can we put some of that maybe towards helping these facilities, right? Right? Maybe, might be an option, but at least.
We will attempt to find a revenue source. I mean, I think the FOG program is in a different funding source. We can directly see significant impacts to the system, if we can get people on the FOG program. It's not the same, I don't think, dollar conversion in this for our savings necessarily, but it's worth looking at for sure.
Okay. There's nothing from the homeless promotion state grant money that could help facilitate some of this?
We can talk about that in the next agenda item.
Good.
But
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
there is potentially some, if you were to be awarded some of the grant funding that's out there, you can use it for operational costs. So
That'd be something to think about.
not in this current pilot project dollars. It's not really identified for that kind of work.
And Nate, something came up in our discussion about being legal to pick up, what was the comment you made, Captain?
So as part of the ordinance language, it's suggested that if a business does not retrieve their cart 30 days after being notified, the city can essentially take claim of that cart and destroy it. I think it was Natural Grocers General Counsel that said that they don't think that that's legal for us to be able to do that.
If it's in our ordinance and we made them aware of it, I think we can do that.
Okay.
I think it's more just trying to, not a threat, but a kind of warning shot across the bow
Yep.
kind of thing.
Those things that those attorneys do, right?
Yeah, they do sometimes.
Thank you, Nate.
Mr.
All
Mayor, I
right.
just wanted to thank the captain for all of his work
Yes.
and the letters and talking to the business owners, so thank you.
I do appreciate it, yes. I know you put a lot of time into it, and now we're sending you down another path, so appreciate it for being so patient and smiling at us. All right. Okay, thanks again for everyone that was involved in that, and thank you for your comments and coming. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is quarterly update on the Coordinated Homeless Pilot Project. And Nicole.
Yes, this is my turn. Thank you. I think in future quarters we'll try and coordinate so our director of our coordinated office can be here, Mr. Andrew Brainerd, but he's at North Bend tonight, so conflict. So I'm going to just kind of give you guys an update and just general public update, so kind of understand reminders. So in the spring of 2022, the city of Coos Bay, North Bend, and Coos County came together to apply for funding under House Bill 4123, which was organized as a pilots project across the state. 8 pilots were chosen, given $1 million of funding over a 2-year period, with a point to develop a strategic plan for a full 5-year period to address homelessness and the challenges around that. We were awarded as one of the 8, and from that we started off with working towards development of that strategic plan, hired a consultant to do so. We had some town hall meetings. We adopted that strategic plan earlier this year, and then since that point, so that'd be kind of like the last time we had an update. Since that point, our coordinated office has some office space in the Newmark Center, so Andrew has a space to be. He has been coordinating monthly conversations with our stakeholders who participated in the strategic plan development, and then we've kind of divided them up so we can kind of really have focused conversations. He's meeting monthly with the healthcare and service providers group, also with the faith-based organizations, and then the last group is the government, so city, county, the tribal governments there, also veterans groups, kind of lumped all of those together. And then we have had one town hall meeting with the businesses, and we did it very much as the town hall meeting we did here with a group of panelists who are, touching in this arena, to just let the businesses know this is the work that's happening. I think there was maybe an idea that they could get a little bit more conversational with us, and there just wasn't enough time. By every time everybody told their story, there just wasn't time. So those meetings are continually happening monthly, and we'll just keep doing that as we identify items in the strategic plan that we can work towards. We did this last week, identify a potential project, as well as submit some funding requests with the Oregon Housing and Community Services, I always get that mixed up, for their balance of state funding. The governor put out an executive order to give some additional dollars to the balance of state, which is the folks that are under the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care. There's $26.1 million to share amongst 26 counties, so it's not a large pot of money when you split it up. They did do some allocation formula work, so there is this portion that they've identified our specific area would be eligible for, as well as a capital bucket of funds that we could put in a request for. So we did submit that request on Friday. We are hoping to hear in the next couple of weeks. Part of that request was to help fund the purchase of a property, which we believe would be perhaps a better location for the Devereaux Center as far as services, and within the community, maybe a better location for the services that they do provide. So again, we're hopeful that we'll get those funding dollars from the state, and that would be our next big push.
So these monthly meetings, are they open to the public where they can view their comments or ask questions and be involved?
So the advisory board, which is the 2 members from each entity, were appointed. We have 3 because we always like to do a little bit more than the rest of everyone. That group meets monthly, and those are considered a public governing body, and so those are available to attend either in person at the Newmark Center, or you can attend via Zoom. The other meetings are really conversational with Andrew and kind of working with, so, people could attend, but it's not a decision-making meeting. It's like a working group of sorts. And from those working groups, they will bring information to the advisory board. So you could, I don't know that there would be great benefit to the average person participating in those, but definitely for the advisory group meetings. We meet the second Wednesday at 1:30. And those meetings are, I think all entities are pushing those meetings notices out. So the county's media list, the city's media list, North Bend's media list, get those notifications. So they are recorded, they're available on there's a page on the county site that they've devoted to this project, so.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions?
I wanted to recognize Southwestern Oregon Community College because they did provide that space for Andrew's office and a conference room to be able to hold these stakeholder meetings. They wanted to be part of the process to make this, to move this in a positive direction, and so I appreciate that. I had something else, but I can't remember what it was. Something that important.
Okay, so I think that's all the agenda items. First, this public comment forum, this goes in the record, right?
Yes, it wasn't asked to be read in the record, it was just asked to be included, and then also so that you guys could see them.
And so there's, I want to bring up it's something that we initiated, which is the FOG program, and I'm glad that we've done that. But through an email I got that someone was unhappy, I saw some information in there, and so I'm a little concerned because I didn't understand that was going to be the way that this was going to be regulated. The FOG program, in that letter, it stated that the business has to have their grease trap done on a monthly basis by a company that can do this. That was never my understanding, because with us having a company do it, the most frequent I could imagine would be quarterly or even semi-monthly, depending on the business. And when I had my business, and I talked to Carmen about this, when these individuals came in, and that's why we wanted it to be handled by a company, is they know when it needs to be done. They come in and they do, they drain your grease trap, and they say, look, Joe, you're getting in a busier time. This needs to be done more than quarterly. We need to come monthly. And I would say, okay. And I think Carmen can probably relate to this too. So I can't imagine us enforcing anything more than quarterly. And on some cases, some smaller businesses might only need to be done every 6 months. But that was the reason for having a professional company come in and do it. They would be able to tell you by doing this that it needs to be done on whatever basis. And I think if we could have that regulated in that fashion somehow, and it would relieve maybe some of these individuals being a little upset, because monthly it's going to be an expense where it might not need to be done monthly. So I think it varies depending on the business. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Carmen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I recently had my inspection and was alerted that we were going to have to be cleaning monthly, and it came to a surprise to me as well. I didn't remember I guess stating that or understanding that would be the protocol. As a fairly busy restaurant, I've just moved to a monthly cleaning, just out of prevention, caution. But in the past, it's served us pretty well. We've always kind of built up a more frequent cleaning, but month by month basis seems to be, I guess, maybe overkill. I'm not a professional at cleaning this, but the business who comes and cleans our grease trap does alert us to these, to the frequency at which would be desirable. And I think to require a monthly cleaning across the board is probably heavy-handed. So that would be my 2 cents.
Can I ask the question, Nicole, in this council's defense, if we actually did say monthly? If I remember correctly, it wasn't just restaurants that were using the FOG program. I thought there were other facilities, and I'm wondering, and they were larger facilities, and I'm wondering if that's how somehow we landed on a month. I can't remember, and I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
So I don't remember either where we landed, but this is anyone who has a facility which could contribute to increased fats, oils, and grease. So yes, it could be a larger facility and maybe monthly, but that's still, I guess, could be a challenge. But so I do remember conversations about that variance in time. And so, this is a new program, and it was a lot of information all at once. It may have been presented that way and was approved, but if that's not intention, we definitely can, look at that and come back if we're looking at it, or if it's just a program, we can modify that. And yeah,
I think we should look at it and try to modify it, because I think it would be a fair way to do it. I'm not saying that some should not do it on a monthly basis, and as Carmen mentioned now, he's up to that. And the ones that do these programs are aware of how often it should be done, and I think we should kind of lean on them. So anyway, that was my take. But with all that being said, I'm glad it's started, and you said it's a new program, so I'm sure there's going to be some adjustments as we go. So anyway, thank you.
And I would just say, if we're requiring, someone that does this as a business to go in and inspect, and they're going to be providing that information about how often it needs to be done, I think that's something that would help if somebody comes in and says you're not doing it frequent enough. If they have something in writing from the company that has done their cleaning, they should be able to present that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, the only one that we have around here is Roto-Rooter, I believe, even though there could be others. On mine, they would say, they write on there, because I wasn't around every time they did it, they would say, we suggest monthly cleaning. And so, I mean, if that kind of criteria and that information could be brought to the city, so they knew that was being done and meeting the criteria.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the policy, is that documentation.
Right.
So, yeah.
Anyway. All right, anyone else have any other comments or?
I just wanted to thank the staff. This is probably one of our longest work sessions ever, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to thank really the Library Foundation and the steering committee, all the committees. You've been working on this for so long and working on it so diligently. And I just want to say thank you. We have lots of opinions up here, but you've really, done the heavy lifting for quite some time, and I think we're all in agreement that we would just like to see that bond passed so that we can have a library for everyone.
I agree. Thank you. All right, we'll adjourn this work session, and we'll see everyone in the future here real soon. Thanks.